person operating the machine has almost as much of an impact on the outcome as the model or the tool that you're using.
Which is insane. Before, it was 100% of the outcome, right?
You know, this idea of shitification, right? Apps become worse over time. Why? We're talking about an entire start to finish, it's kind of a self-healing process without having any human involved in the process.
Engineers are being replaced, let's be honest.
Well, not so fast.
So today we're joined with Shai Wininger from Lemonade. I think you're one of the only companies that I know that is not just an AI native company, but is also thinking about how AI should be built on the developer or the product side. And I think there's nothing more extreme than the experiment you're running now with the one-person team.
Yeah.
Tell me about this.
First, great to be here. Thanks for having me, and it's fun to spend time together after so many years, right?
Way too many
Wow.
years.
You know, I had an interesting conversation today with one of our team members who, as we choose more people to go into this experience, which I'll describe in a minute, and it just occurred to me that there's so much variance in the output that you will get by using a tool like Cursor or a model like, Opus 4.5. The person operating the machine has almost as much of an impact on the outcome as the model or the tool that you're using.
Which is insane. Before, it was 100% of the outcome, right?
It was 100% of the outcome.
So
Yeah.
the fact it's half or whatever, that's shocking.
Yeah, but I think, we got used to thinking that, models do everything by themselves, and especially when we moved into agents mode, kind of you see this execution thing going on. You just ask for one simple thing. You see, all the log fills up with all the actions and the logic and the reasoning, and it feels like it's doing everything by itself, but it's really not. It I think still relies heavily on the operator. It's something that I feel like often gets missed. And the one thing that I think really influences the outcome is just intelligence, the operator's intelligence, but still from just understanding the meta layer, just understanding what you want the machine to achieve. How do you influence it? Do you remember the Dale Carnegie persuasion and how persuasion, the art of persuasion, and how to influence people? I feel like people who went through this training have a better chance of controlling models because we're
So
basically using
the models?
Yeah, you're influencing the model. You want to get it to do what you want, and I don't think we all have the same natural skill in controlling people using language, using natural language. So that's an interesting thing to just kind of keep in mind. And you were mentioning the one-person team. So that's just part of this experiment is how do we rethink the organizational structure when you have tools like that at your disposal? And I think there's something very almost like individual in the process of, at least for now, in the process of building with those tools. I assume that everybody who tried using Cursor, I can't even imagine a situation where you need to bring someone in or work with a team on a single project. It just doesn't feel right. Your team is now an agent. And so you don't need
Multiple
another
agents.
team, right? It's multiple agents, and you're the human operator. But at some point, you just give out control and let it do its thing. Bringing in another team of people, it's just going to make it slower. Everything that's bad about big groups or big teams gets emphasized by an order of magnitude when you're working with AI. And so I feel like the next evolution of a squad or a team would be just one person. Now, what type of skills would that person need? That's an interesting conversation to have. But still, I think, if you take one person, give them the right tools with today's models and Cursor capabilities, stuff like that, they'll probably achieve an order of magnitude better or faster performance than a team of 8 engineers working without AI.
Because they have context, right? They don't need to communicate the context.
Yeah.
Cursor has learned the context over time or whatever tooling. So what can a one-person team ship? From your experience, is it if it's a product manager, if it's a senior engineer, what do they understand about design, or what can they really understand about dev tools, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, how's that work?
So I think interesting philosophical component to this, which actually was invented, I think, from in brand design and then found its way into front end UX and stuff like that, which is having a supportive system. Like the smallest piece, like the atom of design, is a pixel. And when you want to have an AI build something for you, the worst thing you can do is to let it deal with a pixel. Because if you have a 1,000 by 1,000, you have a million different outcomes you can get. That's like the likelihood of it getting to what you're trying to achieve is very, very low. But if you build a system and you say instead of pixel, you have a Lego block, and you've taken the steps to design or build the Lego blocks the way you want them to be. So, in line with
You
your
being the
brand,
company, you
the
being
company, the design, there was a process. You did this even with an AI, that's fine, but you did it separately, and then you came out with a set of things that are a larger component. It's not a pixel anymore. It's a component. It's a drop-down menu that you've worked on building with an AI. It doesn't matter, but it works in a certain way. It behaves in a certain way. It looks in a certain way, and then the AI can choose to incorporate that existing Lego block into the design or not to incorporate it. But it's not going to go and ask those questions that you've already answered in the past again, again, and again. So just from a predictive result perspective, you're just going to get things that are more in line with what you're expecting to get. So that's when you think about front end. Back end works the same way. So if you work in a service, oriented architecture kind of thing, you build those services, you perfect each one of them, you get them to a certain point in time where they are predictable, and then the AI can decide whether it wants to interact with them or not. But they are deterministic by nature, at least
All right, so I go back
for the
to
most
org
part.
design because I think that's the key learning here. So we still have like multi-person teams. We still have specific skills, guilds, whatever. They build the components,
Yeah.
and then the empowerment of that one-person team is because they can pick and choose. They can use their Legos,
Mhm.
right? So if you look at, is that how Lemonade is structured, or
Yeah.
is that how you see it's going to be structured in the future? So you have the people, the architects building kind of those reusable blocks, and then engineers or maybe even product managers are actually doing the Lego building. Is
Yeah.
that like,
It's exactly how we're built. And we call it platform. And we have inside, I spoke about this in the past, we have this thing called LoCo, which is exactly that Lego block box that you get, which does a lot of the complex things in a very predictive and deterministic way. But each one of those things can be associated with each other or operated in a non-deterministic way. And so you can have the idea of insurance is always going to be the same. You're always going to have a policy, you're always going to have a payment, you're always going to have someone coming in and wanting to cancel or renew the policy. Those things are, whether you have boat insurance or car insurance or pet insurance, it's always going to have those Lego blocks in place. The question is, how do you apply a meta layer on top of them? It's like a configuration thing, if you will, that changes this from a boat insurance to a pet insurance. And that's the part where AI comes in. Because this is a configuration layer, which is textual by nature. It's not binary. And so it's much more convenient for an AI to control and configure. And the same goes for design. So we have this thing called Unique Client, which is if you experience the Lemonade product today, you go in, you have a really nice conversation with an AI bot or agent, but it's going to look very consistent. It's not that the agent makes up design elements as you go in real time. Everything has been pre-built, everything has been pre-approved, everything has been polished down to the single pixel. But when it's summoned by the AI, it just composes things on the screen in a way that is conforming to the rules that we've created and provided.
so? It's kind of two layers, right? Two separate. You have, and you can even open source kind of the components of an insurance company, a components of a cyber company. So kind of reusable, but These are not tied to any brand. And then the job of the company CEO, the team that is building, is saying, hey, this is our persona. This is how we should look. This is how we should feel. This is how we should interact, and kind of leverage those components with that persona, or that it's not even brand guideline, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's the company,
Yeah.
and then have AI do the composition.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in a way we've been working like this for a very long time as an industry. I mean, you have SaaS businesses running headless, right? So Stripe, for example, that's a headless business. They don't have
That's a funny way to call them.
they don't have
Middleware.
yeah, I mean, they don't have an opinion about how your customers will experience payments. They might have, but you don't have. You're not forced to use it. They provide you with underlying technology or the capabilities and the operations to be able to collect money or to charge cards. But then you own the experience.
It's so skinning, right? But it used to be
Yeah.
just a very thin layer. And what you're saying is the composition. The composition is actually taking it and say, hey, so we have a payment type, like a component, and we have kind of a onboarding, and we have a claim filing if you're an insurance company. So these blocks, these were not skinnable in the past and not composable. So that would be one thread that's going on. The other thread is is the one that we all hate, which is just keeping the lights on, right? So fine, I have a piece of software. But I need to run a company. I need to run a business. How do you minimize the keeping the lights on, right? That like as you reduce the size of the teams that are building, you now need more teams to actually run the operation.
Yeah, yeah. It's a compounding effect, right? Because by definition, you leave a trail that compounds over time. Each new system, each new service, each new feature is going to leave behind a set of responsibilities that are going to translate into tasks, because there are going to be maintenance things going on, bugs, but also improvements. And so how do you deal with that ever-growing, workload that I think is the reason why companies get bloated over time? This idea of shitification, right? Where apps become worse over time. Why? Because they don't want to invest that additional workload or the additional resources just to keep the lights on. And I think it's a really interesting and problem. I mean, it's a challenge that we've been dealing with for many years in the industry. But I think right now there's a moment in time where this is going to change. So we have this idea of what we call night agents, and the idea of night agents is basically to have an entire set of. It's like a replica of the engineering team and the product team and the QA team running 24/7 on multiple threads or processes while you do other things. We have three levels of that type of framework, which we're aiming to get to. We're now at level 1, but the level 1 is basically self-healing. Is basically a set of agents, each one having their own responsibility, very similar to how a standard engineering team would look like. And these agents, they basically, they look at analytics and logs and issues coming from different systems. HUD is one of them. Capturing issues that happen in production.
HUD, automated logging, depending on the actual case you're solving. So we're talking about kind of the SREs of the world, right? The system reliability.
System reliability, diagnostics, observability. I think the next generation of this thing would be not having those things at all. Because, if you have the right sensor running in your production and it captures, it's able to capture not only the fact that there was a bug, but actually the source of the bug, the flow of the information, the type of things that cause this anomaly to happen, then you have the right context for an agent to then make, to go in and do the fix and test it again with those environment variables to then see that you actually made the fix successfully, and then deploy this to production without having a human involved in the process at all. And that's what the first layer, the first phase of what we're doing is that self-healing system is keeping the lights on, keeping the system running, solving bugs without any human involved.
Right.
If we can do this,
that would be amazing. But
amazing.
take it down to
Yep.
1,000 feet, right? So
Sure.
is it so logging, right? Right now, everyone has people looking
Yeah.
at logs.
Yeah.
What do you do differently? Like, how do you detect that a bug actually happened, a misbehavior? Is it user reports? Is it automated? Like, what kind of infrastructure do you need in place for this system to be relevant?
So the way I think about those things is in a very generic way, where I don't have an opinion about specific systems, or whether it's logs or people reporting, or maybe one day we'll have other AIs coming in and reporting some endpoint or MCP that there was a problem while someone was OpenAI using the ChatGPT and it couldn't go through the payment and it will automatically report. We don't know, and so we built those systems in a way that basically that have the system that has skills to do certain things, but it doesn't have a really rigid way to do those things. And so right now we're using the standard logs, observability platforms. I mentioned HUD, Datadog, stuff like that, to first collect all the anomalies and then qualify them for potential fixes. We then have another agent, which, by the way, funny story, we built it for a completely different purpose, where we started to deploy Cursor in the company. We wanted to know whether it's making any impact. And so how do you measure whether Cursor actually helps you get better, faster? You need to first check whether the types of work you do, the types of tasks you're performing, are actually moving faster. And so, but how do you compare between a text change and a big picture? So you need to be able to size the task, right, or the feature, be able to measure the complexity or the potential complexity of fixing those things. And so we built this agent that actually looks at tickets and says, okay, this is a high complexity, low complexity, medium complexity. I assume that this is going to take 2 days for an average engineer to complete. Once you have that, and that goes back to my point about thinking generically, when you do things in that through that lens, you can reuse a lot of the things you build for things you don't even imagine, or you wouldn't imagine in the first place using them. And so we took this complexity agent and we now connect it to the qualifying agent. And now the agent that looks at the logs can look at, okay, let's look at the complexity of fixing those things. And then the last one is, the one down below is going to be the more complex one. And then we look at another agent which looks at potential business impact and risk factors. What is the blast radius if I get this wrong versus I get this right? Would that affect 100% of the customers, 2 customers? These things matter. And so those things then bring out the stats or the measurements that they get from analyzing those things. And then the system decides whether they want to fix it or not. If we have a potential issue to fix, it then goes to the agent that actually runs in the background, starts to build the code, tests it. We have tens of thousands of automated tests running anyway.
So not human
AI.
triggered,
No
which is
human
which is
involved.
beautiful, right? Today you can have an agent actually go through the logs, understand kind of root cause, and then fix it. But then you can deploy it into like 1% of people, 10%, 15%. So, but it's all fixed in the background. And mind you, this is in portfolio companies. We're talking about keeping the lights on. It's between 20 to 35% of engineering workload. So
when you're our size, I would say even more. It's a lot. And so if you change this, you basically bought yourself so much throughput without hiring a single engineer. And that's even before talking about the the exponential nature of building with AI now. So we're talking about an entire start to finish. You called it keeping lights on. It's kind of a self-healing process where the system becomes better overnight while you sleep, without having any human involved in the process, without having any human look at the results or check the validity of them. It's all automated, and that's level 1. Once we achieve that's level 1.
But if you were to right now start a new company that is only focusing on that, and what's a minimum viable atom for a self-healing system? So if I'm a founder is now thinking of the next company, right? How should I think about that layer in order to get that gain, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now?
So I think the hardest part is validation. That's by far the hardest part because that's where we give up gatekeeping. And so I think that's where also as an industry or, in the AI ecosystem in general, I think there's under indexing on the importance of this. Writing code is easier than testing it. Testing code is easier than testing the UI and validating that it makes sense from a product perspective. And I would love to see much more work being done there. I think that is the kind of the key unlock, because whenever I speak to folks not fully utilizing the power of AI in engineering and product, it's just because they don't feel they can trust it yet. They had one or two experiences. They came out with something that wasn't good enough. Not to say, well, it looked like shit or something like that. And
No, they try to create a chat experience, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Most likely.
yeah, exactly. And it just it's not the standard you expect. But then it's really easy to rule it out. I think the way that AI works today is really similar to brute forcing. So
That's
the
reasoning for you,
model
right?
becomes better. You need less cycles to get things the way you need, to the level that you expect them. When you have a validation system that's powerful enough to send back things to, move tickets back in the Kanban board, move them one slot back and give them back to the model with the feedback why it didn't work, then the likelihood of that cycle at some point exhausting itself into something that passes is very high. And that's how the self-healing system works. And that's how I think an entrepreneur thinking about this problem, that's where they should start.
All right, so it's fairly similar to evals from the other side, right? Evals as this is where AI is today. If it's not working, wait for GPT-6,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's likely it's a similar infrastructure, right? And self-eval systems
Yeah.
seems like validating. So what are the other two levels?
So I think the second part is understanding how to incorporate product thinking and product stakeholder management into a process where if you just look at bugs, then maybe you need it less. But when you start to move upper into the higher levels that I mentioned before, so you have the self-healing, we didn't mention, but we have the self-healing, self-improving, which is taking features from humans and then performing them just like we did with the self-healing. But you get guidance from humans to build new things that weren't there before.
So
And
humans as tools.
Humans as tools. We can talk about this. And then the third level is without the human tool at all, or maybe we just call them when we have an issue or something that's not certain or very high risk, which is a system that understands the business goals of the company. It tracks the business KPIs from the system. It then decides based on the things I mentioned before, complexity, business impact, blast radius, stuff like that, which feature needs to be built next. It then moves it to an agent that defines that feature and then builds it and then tests it in the wild without having a human involved. I think that's where we're going. That's level 3. And as I said, we're now at level 1, but I think there's, thinking about that entrepreneur, there's so much to be done in those 3 levels.
So wait, we should talk deeply about those two other levels. But
Yep.
if I go back to keeping the lights on, how are you thinking about what do you do with the engineers as you pull them out from maintenance? Right? How do you empower them to build features that you're now freed from keeping the lights on?
Oh, that's easy. You have a million items in the backlog just waiting for an engineer to be freed up. I think that's going to find its way into this into the process easily. But again, I think once you have those things out of the way, it's just up to the company's ambition.
But that's a too easy of an answer, right? It's like because what actually breaks? What new constraints appear? Like I love you thinking about org structure. I think org structure is one of the least understood, least discussed topics. People that are now freed from that, what constraints, what other constraints, if you look at what are you missing in the company? What velocity, what stops velocity when you now have more engineers, but you don't necessarily have other parts of the infrastructure?
Yeah. So the weight has been put on engineering and less on product management. And even less on design. There's some attempts, Figma and other folks are trying many things, but I don't think it's fundamental enough. I think it helps you become more efficient as a human. It doesn't replace you yet. And
And engineers are being replaced. Let's be honest.
engineers
But yeah,
are being
no
replaced.
question. So
Yeah.
how,
Well, not so fast. I think there's engineers will be mostly replaced, but the most talented one, the most
fine. That's
energized
10%.
one will be that layer of creating the Lego block, which is
Sure.
basically the most
Yeah.
interesting piece. And so that's where the core. That's what why I'm really interested about. And
How
you know,
should design change?
the-
If you think about the tooling, like what's missing there? What are the constraints that you get when
yeah.
you have more engineers, and what you need on design?
So I think sporadically, some companies chose to do this well, but it's not a system that's out of the box. Helping you build something that's a system that is a hierarchical design system that's built on those atoms that make up of molecules that make up of organisms that you can control, and then have the AI kind of compose them together. I think that piece it also drills down from the design system into the React or the front end components into the back end. There's something there in the connection that I feel like it spills out of Lovable and Base 44 and those things into the realm of enterprises where you still need control over which system you use. It's not going to be completely isolated yet, and I think that kind of integration, deep integration, both vertically from the design decisions that is made down to the functionality of the item, how it connects to the data, how it loads, what's the experience from an animation perspective, and then how it gets into a toolbox that's available to an AI.
Yeah.
Because the AI has to be then handed off with something that, certain set of tools, a context, a rule set. You need to have those guidelines somehow generated automatically without needing a designer think about them and then describe them in words, right?
Yeah, I'm still like deeply uncomfortable that it's not figured out, right? Because
Yeah.
effectively, stage one, let's get rid of the boring stuff. Let's focus on the unglamorous but
Mhm.
foundational of just keeping the lights on. For level 2, level 3 that you describe, unless the world figures out the design part, that won't work, right? If the agents are to build,
Yeah.
that needs to be figured out. But
I'm not
let's
sure. I'm not sure. I think it depends on two things. One is the UI framework that you're using. I'll explain. We made a choice 10 years ago to go with a chat interface to basically have almost 100% of our interactions with customers through a chat interface. This is the conversational UI concept. I think we're probably, I don't know, I'm guessing we're probably the
Maya.
Maya and Jim. We're probably the only company in the New York Stock Exchange traded that's selling 100% of its business through AI and chat, and have been for many years. And one thing you learn from that is that you learn to appreciate the flexibility it gives you and the forgiveness from a UI perspective. Because when you have think about the OpenAI experience, right? The ChatGPT or the one of those Gemini, whatever it is. The difference in UX between those different tools is almost zero. It's
Mhm.
negligent. It doesn't really matter. If you wake up tomorrow and you get a new box, a new frame, a new drop down, a new round edges around an image, who cares? We're
So
now focused on value. And I think there's a transition. Who cares really matters here. I feel like I keep coming back to those two words when I see people trying too hard to create designs that are, trying to make them look different or force
Hmm.
them into looking professional. I think that transition from very rich person, a very rich design, pixel heavy kind of framework into something that looks more like an open AI. It's just a simple chat, simple text. Just give it to me. Just let me know what you want me to do. Answer my questions. Super utilitarian. I think that's where we're going from a design perspective without controlling them.
but you also don't know. The user can't necessarily know. When it's insurance, you know exactly what's going on. We actually had Asaf Elovic here, head of AI at Monday, and he actually described a situation where the chat interface, like, people do not know what to do with it versus an opinionated design. But let's cover this in episode 2. I think that without getting that right, you can't actually let agents build software. So that's going to be an interesting focus.
Yeah. I don't know why. I feel like it's maybe because it's something I've been doing so many years, just designing stuff. It just feels to me much more of a commodity than it might be considered. I feel like when you have all the UI frameworks, you have Tailwind, right? The reason that you have agents doing such a good job at designing, an interface, you build something, you just ask it, hey, give me a backend or a back office interface for a shipping company. It's going to do a pretty good job at first try. Why? Because it doesn't need to deal with a pixel. It only summons components that someone else has already designed. It relies heavily on those Tailwind things, right? It relies heavily on the 3JS libraries. Doesn't start from scratch. And I feel like that level, we need to find where is the right place for us to play, from the native JS down to the single pixel up to a lovable product that gives you everything out of the box. You need to choose where you want to play. We chose where we're comfortable. We have a lot of influence over the design, but it's still very effective from the point that the likelihood of you making an error that's going to stand out in design is very low, because you're only playing with blocks that we've allowed you to play with.
Yeah. Thank you, Shai. We'll stop here and get ready for episode 2, where we speak about how to turn AI from running the DevOps into actually building the product. If you have any questions, comments, flames, or just want to recommend new people on the show, email us at almosthuman@aleph.vc. I'm Eden Shochat. Thanks for listening. See you next episode.